Good evening and welcome to Rapid Report, your trusted source for breaking news and in-depth political analysis from Washington and across the United States. Tonight, we focus on a developing story that could reshape the political landscape in 2026. President Donald Trump faces growing resistance within his own party as the midterm elections approach. From Republican senators breaking with him on war powers, to House Republicans challenging his tariff policies and even clashes with independent institutions like the Federal Reserve, the cracks in the GOP are becoming impossible to ignore. With voter concerns about the cost of living and special election results signaling Democratic momentum, the Republican Party is navigating turbulent waters, fraying but not broken. Stay with us as we break down what this means for the midterms, the future of the party, and the American political system at large. And before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to Rapid Report, hit the notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up so you never miss critical updates that matter to you. As the United States moves deeper into early 2026, the Republican Party's internal cohesion is under pronounced strain. President Donald Trump, now well into his second non-consecutive term, has pursued an aggressive and wide-ranging agenda that has both galvanized his base and alarmed many members of his own party. With the 2026 midterm elections looming, fractures within the GOP are no longer subtle whispers, but publicly observable tensions. These divisions span foreign policy, economic governance, and the traditional conservative emphasis on limited executive power. Midterm landscape and voter concerns. The political terrain ahead of the midterms has proven unforgiving for incumbents, particularly Republicans aligned closely with Trump's agenda. Economically, the cost of living tops the list of voter concerns, with inflation and price pressures dominating headlines and voter sentiment. Rising prices have given Democrats a ready message heading into the elections that Republican-led policy choices have worsened household affordability. Republicans currently retain a narrow Senate majority and control of the House, but those margins are fragile. Even before the midterms, the GOP's grasp on both chambers appears vulnerable, especially as swing district Republicans confront a hostile electorate worried about economic instability and political polarization. Democrats have capitalized on these issues, framing the midterm cycle as a referendum on governance and economic priorities. Republican senators begin distancing from Trump, once viewed as a unified bloc behind the president's agenda. GOP lawmakers are increasingly outspoken about their reservations. Some Republican senators have publicly and privately questioned Trump's judgment and characterized certain actions as volatile or impulsive, particularly in the realm of foreign policy and executive overreach. High-profile examples include debates over U.S. engagement in Venezuela, where Republicans on and off Capitol Hill have expressed unease about military involvement and war powers constraints. Public opinion on the U.S. role in Venezuela is deeply divided, with a majority of Americans expressing little confidence in Trump's handling of the situation. Even as Trump continues to wield significant influence, the fact that some Republican senators are willing to openly push back illustrates that the party's internal discipline is not monolithic. Key policy clashes. War powers and tariffs. War powers on Venezuela tensions erupted in the Senate when a resolution aimed at limiting presidential war powers, chiefly over involvement in Venezuela, highlighted GOP discomfort. Although Trump succeeded in defeating the measure, the narrow margins and visible disagreements revealed fault lines over U.S. foreign military engagements. This incident underscored a broader dynamic. Republican lawmakers want to avoid open conflict with Trump, but are increasingly uneasy about open-ended military authority without congressional input. Tariffs and the Supreme Court rebuff. One of the most significant policy fights has emerged over Trump's expansive tariff regime, a signature part of his economic strategy. In a major setback for the administration, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down large portions of Trump's global tariffs, concluding that he lacked the constitutional authority to impose wide-ranging taxes without explicit congressional authorization. The backlash was immediate and diverse. Some Republican leaders celebrated the ruling, framing it as a victory for constitutional checks and balances. Figures such as former Vice President Mike Pence, Senator Rand Paul, and other GOP lawmakers praised the decision for reaffirming congressional authority over fiscal policy. Trump retaliated with anger and personal attacks on the conservative justices, asserting that he would pursue alternative legal routes to reimpose tariffs. This combative response only deepened fissures within the party. Crucially, some Republicans have openly expressed relief that the court decision shielded them from political fallout over tariff-driven price increases, indicating that internal GOP consensus on economic issues is weakening. Federal Reserve clash beyond trade and foreign policy. Another key flashpoint involves the Federal Reserve. Although the administration has not formally launched an investigation into Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, as the user prompt suggested, tensions between Trump and the Federal Reserve are real and ongoing in political discourse. Trump's public criticism of Powell and pressure for rate cuts, especially in the face of inflation concerns, has stirred unease among fiscal conservatives and free market Republicans. The independence of the Federal Reserve has traditionally been a Republican priority, and calls within GOP circles to maintain that independents have grown louder as Trump pushes for lower rates and aggressive monetary policy shifts. Special elections and Democratic momentum. The electoral picture ahead of the midterms has been favorable to Democrats in local and state races, a potential harbinger for the national cycle. Several state legislative seats formerly held by Republicans have flipped to Democratic control since Trump's return to the White House, showcasing shifting voter sentiment at the grassroots level. In particular, a Texas state Senate seat flipped with a dramatic swing, signaling potential trouble for Republicans in traditionally secure areas. While these races are not federal, they reflect broader national trends and energize Democratic narratives about Republican vulnerability, especially in districts where independents and swing voters are increasingly pivotal. Trump's approval ratings decline. Public approval of President Trump has declined significantly in early 2026. According to a Pew Research Center survey, his national approval rating stands at 37, with substantial drops in confidence across demographic groups, and even among some Republican voters. Key findings include: a majority of Americans now disapprove of his handling of major policy areas, including the economy and governance. Support for Trump's overall agenda has eroded not only among independents and Democrats, but also within segments of the Republican base. A growing share of Republicans no longer believe lawmakers in their party are obligated to back Trump unconditionally. This drop in approval, especially among independents and moderate Republicans, could have major midterm implications. DHS shutdown, immigration, and legislative strains. In early 2026, disagreements over immigration enforcement and budget priorities contributed to a brief Department of Homeland Security shutdown, revealing deep divides in how Republicans approach controversial policy topics. Moderates in swing districts found themselves caught between appeasing Trump's hardline base and responding to constituents uncomfortable with aggressive immigration enforcement. Growing fear and anonymous criticism. While public dissent among GOP lawmakers remains limited, multiple reports indicate that private criticism of Trump's choices is intensifying. Some Republican legislators labeled the president's decisions as irrational or damaging in private conversations, though many fear reprisal or primary challenges if they speak out publicly. This environment, where dissent is real but often unspoken, has led some observers to describe the party as held together with duct tape and fear, highlighting the tension between public unity and private discontent. Looking ahead to the midterms. As the 2026 midterm elections approach, the Republican Party stands at a critical inflection point. Internal disagreements over war powers, trade policy, executive authority, and economic governance illustrate that Trump's influence, while still potent, is far from unchallenged. Declining approval ratings and Democratic gains in special elections suggest that voters are increasingly receptive to alternative leadership. Yet the GOP is not poised for collapse. Structural advantages, entrenched support among core voters, and strong fundraising still provide resilience. The central theme of early 2026 is that the Republican Party is fraying but not broken. The cracks are widening, and how GOP leaders navigate these internal disputes in the coming months will likely determine whether the party remains cohesive or splinters under the pressures of midterm politics. 1. Structural fractures in the Republican Party. While headlines capture isolated events, senators opposing Trump on Venezuela, House Republicans rejecting tariffs, the underlying issue is a structural tension between Trump loyalists, who prioritize loyalty to the former president and his political brand above policy consistency, institutional conservatives, who value the traditional party structure, procedural governance, and long-term political viability over immediate loyalty to Trump. This tension manifests in multiple ways. Senate hesitancy on foreign interventions. Senators opposing Trump's war powers signals that the GOP elite are still concerned about executive overreach and public backlash. House resistance on tariffs. Members in swing districts risk electoral backlash from higher consumer prices, forcing a choice between Trump's base and moderate voters. Implication: the party's future is not a simple binary of Trump versus non-Trump. It is a spectrum where lawmakers constantly negotiate between loyalty, fear, and strategic survival. 2. Political calculus in key swing districts. Special elections in Texas and other states demonstrate Democratic momentum. These localized results are signals, not guarantees, but they highlight erosion of Trump's coattail effect. Previously, Trump could help Republican candidates coast to victory, even in competitive districts. Now his polarizing influence may actually suppress GOP chances. Independent voter volatility. Independents in swing districts are increasingly reactive to economic issues, particularly inflation and housing costs. Republican resistance to tariffs and controversial policies may reflect an attempt to retain this voting bloc. Implication: the midterms are shaping up as a test of whether the GOP can balance Trump's influence with pragmatic local governance, or whether adherence to Trump's nationalized agenda risks further losses. 3. Executive overreach and institutional pushback. Trump's confrontations with the Federal Reserve, threats toward the judiciary, and aggressive use of executive power illustrate a growing executive institutional tension. Federal Reserve clash. Threatening investigations into monetary authorities undermines independent institutions, which traditionally enjoy bipartisan support. This creates friction even within his party, as GOP lawmakers historically prioritize checks on executive power in monetary policy. Supreme Court rulings. Judicial checks on Trump's tariffs signal that legal institutions can act as a stabilizing force when partisan politics becomes extreme. Implication: if Trump continues to clash with institutional norms, the party may face long-term reputational risks, not just electoral losses. GOP lawmakers must navigate a tension between maintaining loyalty to Trump and defending institutional credibility. 4. Demographic shifts and approval ratings. Trump's approval rating of 37% nationally is more than just a number. It reflects deepening demographic challenges. Independent and moderate voters are shifting away, driven by economic concerns and partisan fatigue. Younger generations, Gen Z and non-white voters, are increasingly alienated, which affects the GOP's long-term voter base. Even core Republican confidence is eroding, signaling potential fractures in the traditional base if Trump's agenda continues without adaptation. Implication: the GOP is facing a double pressure: short-term, midterm risks and long-term demographic realignment. These forces could influence candidate recruitment, messaging, and policy priorities in 2026 and beyond. 5. Psychological and strategic dynamics. Within the GOP, A key theme is fear as a glue. Many GOP lawmakers remain publicly loyal to Trump not out of agreement, but out of fear of retaliation from Trump's political machinery. Primary challenges fueled by Trump-aligned super PACs. Social media attacks targeting dissenters. Implication: this fear-based cohesion is unstable, and a single triggering event, such as a major policy failure, a public rebuke from Trump, or electoral losses, could catalyze open rebellion within the party. 6. Potential midterm scenarios. Based on current trends, early 2026 could produce several possible outcomes. 1. Partial Republican cohesion with losses. GOP holds narrow Senate and House majorities, but loses key swing districts. Trump's brand survives, but the party weakens in practical influence. 2. Open GOP rebellion. Some senators and House members openly oppose Trump on multiple fronts. The party faces a public fracture, potentially boosting Democratic gains and forcing leadership changes. 3. Strategic retrenchment. Republicans attempt to triage the party, emphasizing local issues over Trump's nationalized agenda to retain vulnerable seats while placating the base. Implication: the 2026 midterms could reshape the Republican Party's internal hierarchy, setting the stage for 2028 and beyond. 7. Broader implications for American politics. The Trump-era GOP illustrates the dilemma of populist leadership within institutional parties. Loyalty, fear, and performance pressures interact in complex ways, influencing legislative effectiveness and electoral strategy. If the Republican Party fails to adapt, it risks persistent losses among swing voters, weakening its national position and accelerating the rise of alternative conservative voices. Democrats, by contrast, may consolidate gains if they exploit GOP fractures while presenting pragmatic solutions on economic and governance issues. Deep analysis takeaways for the article. Highlight structural versus superficial fractures in the GOP. Emphasize local versus national tensions, especially in swing districts. Explore executive institutional clashes and how they alienate moderate Republicans. Include demographic and generational shifts as a key vulnerability. End with strategic scenarios for midterms, underlining the fraying but not broken theme. That wraps up our analysis on the state of the Republican Party and the challenges President Trump faces as the 2026 midterms draw near. As we've seen, internal divisions, declining approval ratings, and voter shifts could redefine the political map in the months ahead. But the question remains, will the GOP hold together, or are we witnessing the beginning of a larger realignment? Rapid Report will continue to monitor these developments closely, bringing you expert insights and real-time updates. If this report helped you understand the stakes of the 2026 elections, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends and colleagues, and subscribe to Rapid Report for more in-depth political coverage. Your engagement helps us bring the news that truly matters to millions of viewers like you.